We believe the current market consensus that the Fed will be forced to cut rates in the second half will be proven wrong. This should see silver fall to the low 18s. Well, hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics as we continue digging on into the silver world with today. We're recording on Tuesday the 9th, a price just short of $26 in the silver land. So been a good start to 2023 so far and dig into some of the latest developments. We're going to touch on some of the Silver Institute trends that they put out in their recent World Silver Survey, amongst other things such as latest happenings at the Federal Reserve, which interesting is one of the things that the Silver Institute mentioned, how price more driven by the Federal Reserve than any sort of supply and demand fundamentals. But we'll try and connect all of those factors today because fortunately I am joined once again by David Stein of Kuya Silver, who is one of the people leading a company that is going to be producing silver soon. So who better to dig into with this? And David, it's great to see you again and have you back on the show. And how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me.
Well, great to have you back here. And as I mentioned, at least as of Tuesday the 9th, we're sitting there with silver just under $26. It's about 25.80 on the futures contract. And quite a rally it's been over the past couple months. We had a dip to just below $20 earlier in March until the banking issues flared up, which again, a lot of people were concerned about. David, you and I have talked about that quite a bit for the past couple months, that keep raising interest rates in a highly leveraged environment, and you may run into some of these problems. So perhaps just to start, I'd love to get your take as we're getting close to halfway through 2023. And fortunately, even despite Federal Reserve rate hikes, we do have a higher silver price. And just curious, any of your thoughts on what we've seen so far this year?
Well, I think we've seen a good start to a longer term rally. Definitely feels like the Fed pivot, let's call it for lack of a better word, whether they pause or whatever actually happens, but that change in momentum from tightening to not tightening anymore is a big that's a big sort of sea change in the financial markets. And that looks like it should be good for precious metals. I think gold's been leading the charge nicely, which is what we want to see if we're going to see higher silver prices, in my opinion. It's important that we see gold leading as it has, and it's close to all-time highs, very close. And the other thing that I like to look at is also the U.S. dollar strength, and it's still very strong. It's still very close to its near-term peak. So I think there's a lot of room to go there. When we do see like a longer term precious metals bull market, you would expect the U.S. dollar to fall quite a bit.
Yeah, and we've seen a bit of a decline from last year. Here it was above 114 back in September, October, at the same time that the gold and silver prices were just beginning their rally. And again, you and I were at the Silver Symposium, which I believe was the actual low point in
Bottom.
the market. So it made for some interesting days there. Although, like you mentioned, with the Federal Reserve, seems as if we've gotten to the end of the rate hikes. Looking today at the Fed probabilities, about 80% priced in for a pause at the next meeting in June, 20% for another hike. Curious, any thoughts you had on that recent meeting where some people were expecting to see a pivot? I wasn't really expecting Powell to say all that much different, where seems like he continued with his mantra of they're very concerned about inflation, ready to continue raising rates, and he largely continued that in the statement and at the press conference afterwards. But curious if you think we're basically at the end of the cycle. Fortunately, gold and silver have responded well even as we've approached that. But any thoughts on where we stand in the Federal Reserve right now?
Well, I don't think they are going to raise again. I don't think it really matters if they do raise it a little bit, but you know, this is classic Fed missing the bottom and missing the top, right? And you know, they kept interest rates low for too long. They're going to keep them high for too long. So you know, I think just people need to get prepared for that, you know, and it seems like they only take swift action when there's a crisis. And I guess, you know, the Silicon Valley Bank and the other banks that failed in the last month isn't a big enough crisis for them to really act quickly on anything. And so they're, I think, being complacent, frankly, um, as to the policy. I think a lot of numbers are showing that, you know, that the market is a lot of parts of the economy are weakening and have been weakening, and you know, and you know, it's largely due to the higher interest rates.
Yeah, as you mentioned, certainly things are being impacted now. On Monday, we had the SLOOS report, Senior Loan Officer Opinion Survey, showed tighter lending standards. Continue to see, despite the BLS numbers, here's another tech companies announced mass layoffs. And actually, it was interesting when the labor report came out on Friday. Then we see these revisions to prior months where in those prior months when the number came out beat expectations and the market reacts to that, yet we find out a couple months later, if you factor in the revisions, would have been a bit of a different story. And again, the thing that I'm growingly concerned about is that you have a lot of loans coming due in the commercial real estate sector, which does not look like it's setting up for a good outcome, and speaks to what you were saying, where they're, especially with the rates higher, it sounds like you're not a fan of the idea of higher for longer, as the Fed has suggested, but certainly it seems like we're going to be feeling the effects of these higher rates and some issues still out there, even in addition to what we've already seen so far with the banking.
Yeah, I mean, I think the you know, the trend in inflation has slowed a lot, and you know, that would support you know, the pause in and of itself. And you know, and I think, as I said before, there's a lot of parts of the economy are weakening. I mean, housing is a huge part of the economy that's very heavily affected by interest rates. So, um, you know, I think they're sort of playing chicken, I guess, against whether or not there will be some kind of crash, like catastrophic crash, 2008 style. And you know, I think that what's been happening with some of these, you know, regional and you know, regional banks is quite alarming. Um, and I'm frankly a bit surprised that they're not taking more drastic action right now.
Well, I hear you, and I wonder how much longer it'll be, or I wonder also what the conversations are like behind closed doors before what they release to the public, if they're perhaps a little bit more concerned than they let on. And again, at least good to see that Silver has been responding so far pretty well. Although, as I mentioned, wanted to dig into the World Silver Survey that came out a couple of weeks ago with some interesting notes here. And again, along the lines of what we were talking about before, I'm going to read this paragraph here. Looking ahead, in spite of the recent boom in investor demand and the rally, we believe 2023 will see a repeat of last year with another hefty deficit. We also think the institutional investment will eventually run out of steam, as we believe the current market consensus that the Fed will be forced to cut rates in the second half will be proven wrong. This should see silver fall to the low 18s before year end, culminating in a full year average of 2130. Interesting what they mentioned there. I know this was written by Metals Focus. They don't see rates being cut in the second half of this year. My counter to that is that we haven't seen rates cut yet, and we've been in the midst of a 30% rally in silver, similarly strong rally in gold. Thoughts on this? Again, they're suggesting that the price will once again be driven by what the institutional investors are doing in the paper market. silver deficit or not, be darned. But curious, any thoughts that you have there on what Silver Institute is writing about here?
I think that reads to me like it's a very stale comment now. And I know that these reports take months to put together. But I think if you took that same argument and applied to it today with gold with the silver at almost 26, even if you wanted to make that argument that it's going to run out of steam, I think 18 is way too low. So it's just percentage wise, that's a massive move down on fundamentals that are not that bad. Trading moves don't I don't think in silver cause, what is that? That's $8 on 26. So more like a 40% move,
Yeah.
30% move. So I don't think sort of trading related fluctuations are going to cause that kind of a move. I think and I'm certainly more bullish than that, but I'm just saying that even if they were right, I think that number is way too low. I think they probably picked that when silver was 22 or something like that.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and certainly is it possible that we don't see rate cuts later this year? I mean, I think that's certainly a possibility. I think there's also a good chance that we do see the cuts. Here is the Fed futures. They're pricing in today the first cut in September. And I mean, I guess it's a tricky thing to forecast when a bank goes down, when it becomes more problematic. Obviously, there's a bit of a lag between when the rates are raised and when you feel the impact of that. Although I mean, keep in mind that last year when we saw that decline down to the $18 range, slightly below, I mean, we were seeing 75 basis point hikes, which hard to imagine that the Fed is going to revert to something like that this year. And I would think that would be a little bit aggressive, seeing the price down to $18 just if there's suspension of the or a postponement of coming to rate cuts. Although another note they have here that obviously you are focused with your projects in Peru, and as the report mentioned, we did have another big deficit last year. You mentioned Peru suffered the greatest decline output in 2022 with falling grades at several major mines, disruption due to social unrest. And I do hear from people who are wondering what's going on in Peru, obviously one of the larger silver producers. So anything that you could share on that?
Yeah, I think the stuff related to the social unrest is largely behind us now. Things have been much calmer the last few months there on that front. But there's still, I would say, significant underinvestment in Peru in the mining sector. I mean, especially outside of copper, so that includes silver, and so just it's more because of the underinvestment in existing mines and new mines, that you're going to see continued, I think, drops in the silver production. Now, how much of that last year was due to the social unrest? That was mostly basically the very end of the year, so it wouldn't have a number of days. It wouldn't have affected very much, like less than a month. So I think that minus 8.5 is largely due to more technical reasons, like falling grades and let's say maybe outdated equipment or whatever, stuff like that. So the stuff that capital can fix that, but it's not happening yet.
And what about the permitting situation in Peru? Obviously, we know that there's seemingly a lack of copper in terms of what we're being required going forward, especially with some of the green mandates. What is the permitting environment like in Peru right now? Is new projects being able to get permitted?
Case by case, I think things are getting permitted in Peru. I don't think there's been a whole lot of new projects, even trying to get permitted in Peru. I think it's mostly They're mostly running existing projects that were already permitted, let's say prior to 2020. We did get permits to build a new mill in early 2022. So that's that suggests that it can be done, because certainly we were able to do that. I think there's still a big issue with the exploration companies, the pure exploration companies. It takes far too long to get permits to do very basic exploration, very very basic exploration drilling. And there's some kind of technical reasons why that's happened. I think just some just some frankly some mismanagement, I guess, of some of the rules and how they were implemented. Maybe they didn't think about some of the implications several years ago, 5-6 years ago, when some laws were passed. And I don't think they necessarily meant to kill the exploration sector, but they sort of did it by accident. And my understanding is that they are actually working in the legislature to fix that now. So there might be some good news on that front coming in the next few months. So stay tuned for that. But in terms of the more developed projects, the mines, I think it's more of a capital issue than a permitting issue.
Okay, although one place where it does seem like it's going to be getting harder to get permitting. I know you're familiar with the recent laws that Mexican Senate passed regarding the mining situation, one of which is shortening concessions from 50 years to 30 years. Obviously, a few other components to that, but not going to make mining in Mexico, obviously the largest silver producer, easy going forward. And just curious your thoughts on what we're seeing out of Mexico. And again, these are things that would not be affecting the supply quite as much today, but in the years going forward. But just curious, in contrast to what you mentioned about Peru, what you thought about the impact of the recent Mexican changes.
Yeah, I mean, the devil's going to be in the details here. Things like water extraction and dealing with the local communities. It can make a big impact on some projects. Mexico has some areas, some parts of the country that are very, very dry, and where getting water could be to use in mine, which you need water to run mining operations typically. So that could be an issue. And certainly, strengthening of the local community's rights in terms of profit sharing or royalties or whatever you want to call it. It's something I think we've kind of already been through that in Peru and dealt with it, and now have a pretty I think the communities and the mining companies have sort of pretty good understanding of what each other's rights are and responsibilities are. Whereas if you change that, then it sort of just ushers into a whole new period of risk, where one side might not understand the other. They might think they should get more or whatever, and that can create very localized problems. Maybe it will affect the mining industry, maybe not. In terms of a project here or there running into problems, but yeah, I mean, it's something that we deal with as mining companies all the time, no matter what jurisdiction you're in. Really, I think it speaks to you're going to see which management teams are prepared for those changes. I think that's what'll matter at the end of the day, more so than the individual project or mine.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and just interesting seeing how world calling for more metals, yet a lot of the places that some of these metals coming from not necessarily getting easier to navigate, although you have a good management team in place certainly can help. And David,
well, before we move on, Chris, you raise a good point where there's a big dichotomy here, which is probably a huge opportunity for investors, where you've got a lot of, let's say, laypersons, including people who run governments, would look at metal prices today and say, those metal prices are pretty high. You should be making a lot of money, right? And obviously, some companies are making a lot of money if they've been into production and their projects are top quality projects. There are lots of very profitable mines all over the world, all sorts of commodities. But the the level of bullishness maybe that some of these governments think that we can pay more taxes, that we can pay more royalties to a community, whatever they decide, um, does not actually match up with the capital flows into the sector. Capital flows into the sector have been really, really poor for several years now, for many years now. And, that's why there is underinvestment. That's why a lot of mines aren't being built. Again, I'm speaking very generally. And that's probably, again, shows you a dislocation where, that the supply increases are not going to happen. They're going to be very, very slow to react to higher prices. And commodity by commodity will be slightly different, but I know the silver market really well. That's what, Kuya is focused on. And I think, if the silver price went to $50 tomorrow, the price increases in silver globally would be, still single digit percent. It would be a trickle. And over many years that will adjust. But you could have several years where there is a huge and an even greater undersupply or supply deficit than we have today.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Certainly seems like money has been hesitant to come back in the sector. I think there's a lot of people wondering if, all right, we have $25, $26 silver today, or wondering if they're going to go back to something like the 18 or even $20 number, perhaps suggested by World Silver Survey. In fact, I'm going to pull up the charts of the SIL and the SILJ indices. Here we see that the price has rebounded from last summer's lows back there at 22 up to 30, although still relative to where we were about 2 years ago, quite a bit lower. Obviously, cost of capital higher. Here is the SILJ, where we see back in May of 2021, where you had slightly higher silver price, about $28, but we're still basically a third lower. And I know, obviously, in addition to running your company, you're active in the mining sector. And just curious of your thoughts. That's something we've talked about in some of our past calls of mining stocks relative to the bullion price. Obviously, we do have the higher cost of capital you mentioned, and the inflation expenses getting up there as well. But where do you see the mining stocks in silver relative to the bullion price right now?
Well, it definitely have been, underperforming. Definitely been disappointing. Even though, nice to see the rally off the bottom in the last, 6 months or so, six months, 9 months, whatever, going back. So look, I think, I mean, two things. I think one is you're correct. There are some fundamental challenges in mining equities in general, cost of capital, inflation of costs, etc. That the prices are not high enough to compensate for that yet, and I think that's why you haven't seen a bigger rally in silver or ETFs or gold ETFs or whatever. And then the other thing I'd like to point out when you put this SIL or SILJ out is that if you actually look at the components of this, the exposure to silver here is less than 50%. It's somewhere between 30 and 50%. So you got a lot of more gold exposure there. These guys that put together these indexes have a real tough time finding enough silver companies to actually make an index. So they end up throwing gold companies that have some silver production in there. And you can see on there Korea Zinc company. SSR. I think they their own presentation will tell you they produce maybe 20% of their revenue comes from silver. So, again, I'm not picking on anyone here, but that's just the reality. Is there that index will underperform a pure silver company like like Kuya, I would say, when we really get into a rally. So not only are these bigger companies lower risk, lower beta, I should say, but they're also not fully exposed to silver.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, not a whole heck of a lot of pure primary silver producers left out there, which obviously it's not easy to
Like
focus on just
Capstone is 7% of the index.
what's that?
Capstone copper is 7% of the index.
Yeah, this is the SILJ we're looking at here. So I've always thought there were some interesting choices, especially some of the companies, Pan American and First Majestic, in both the junior and the miners index. So, but yeah, like you point out, certainly a lot of gold exposure and not easy to be running just silver focused, although perhaps in our last comment, that is what you are doing with Kuya Silver, and perhaps you could provide an update on how things have been going. I know you had a nice discovery recently with your Angus vein at the Campbell Crawford target, and perhaps you could just catch us up to speed on how things are coming along there.
Sure. Well, I mean, very exciting days at Kuya because we now have two, significant silver projects that we're, advancing and adding value at the same time, which I think is very unique for a company our size. You really get exposure to, to two assets, either of which I think would more than justify our market cap right now, and you get basically both. So I think it's a great opportunity for investors, and we're really just starting to see what we have in the Silver Kings project. We just made the discovery a little over a month ago now, so that's very, very exciting, and we'll have more results on that very, very soon, and then that'll lead into more exploration, to really determine size potential and delineation of we think we'll have a new resource there at some point, and maybe our second mine one day. Of course, our first one will be Bethania, and that's been our flagship project and still is. It's more advanced. It's a high grade narrow vein silver mine with some byproducts as well, and we're sort of going through some of the commercial activities in the background right now so that we can be ready to restart that later this year as soon as possible. Certainly, silver price is not an issue for us. We're happy. 25, 26 or even lower, we could restart. So we're just again doing all the boring stuff in the background to prepare for that.
Yeah, and I know along those lines, one of the things that you and I have talked about quite a bit over the past year, that now looking into a toll milling option and still hoping to go into production later this year is the plan.
Yeah, exactly. So we have the toll milling. We have at least one toll milling agreement done, and it doesn't stop us from doing more and having multiple places to send our ore. In the area, we're in a very active, well-known mining area in central Peru, so there's no lack of infrastructure for us to send our ore. So that's one of the commercial agreements that we've been able to do, and there's a few others that we're working on, and again, I think we'll be putting out news on that as soon as we can.
Well, I think it's going to be an exciting time. I know you've been looking forward to that. I think the market will be looking forward to that, especially since even if we go down to the $18, $19 range in silver, which I tend to think seems a bit unlikely, that you've set it up that you're still profitable there. So obviously, if we're anywhere near that $26 mark or conceivably even higher, would certainly be good news as you go into production. So David, appreciate everything you're doing and what you shared today. And perhaps just if people have questions, would like to find out more about the project, can you let them know the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah. So our website, www.kuyasilver.com. You can see actually right there where you are, Chris. If you want to join our mailing list, you can subscribe for the updates right there on the front page. And that way you'll get our press releases and any of other events or anything that you might want to know about. We're actually doing a local event in Toronto in a few weeks for the Toronto investors, at least the ones that I know about. So we'll be doing more stuff like that as as the market continues to open up and we're traveling more and all that good stuff. So I would encourage people to sign up for our email list so they know about activities like that, and also keep up with our news. And then if you go to the contact tab, you can actually ask us a question there. You can book a call with management, and you can, in that question for Kuya Silver box, you could say, I'm in Denver. I got a bunch of investors in Denver. Why don't you come here and do a presentation for us? And that would be good to know. So you can write whatever you want in that box, and we'll read it.
Well, appreciate that. Appreciate that you do get back to the people who are interested, and it's nice when companies have management that's responsive. So if anybody does have questions, you can go to kuyasilver.com to that contact page. And David, just appreciate you making some time again. Always fun to catch up with you and try and make some sense out of the interesting world that silver is. Perhaps gets a bit more complicated than we might have ever imagined when we got into this, but certainly has been a good year so far in the silver market, and we'll look forward to continuing digging in and making some sense out of everything that's going on, and look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Okay, appreciate it. Always fun. Thanks.